I imagine you don't want to lead on too much about who you're going to select with your 2 first-round picks, but maybe you can help us understand the criteria, the direction you want to go in identifying who your targets are at 1 and 6.
Sure, it's a big patch. Big picture, you look at your roster and you go through free agency, you go through your mini camps, you kind of piece together salary cap, everything goes into it from a planning process, and then you look at the talent positionally across the draft board, and you try to slot who's going to fit in where and where you think the players have an opportunity to make your team, and whether you have a player who you think is going to be in camp now is important, whether you think you can wait a couple years like every year. It's no different than most years. The nice thing for us this year is we don't have to wait the gamesmanship of speculating of what's other teams are going to do affecting your first pick. We're kind of in a nice position that we know once we make our decision, it doesn't matter what other teams do in regards to that first pick. So it's a nice spot.
Just talking to somebody who described your overall depth and things you've referred to during CFL week and such. That if you drafted a blue chip offensive lineman, I'm not sure where he would fit in this season. With that in mind, what are your positional needs?
Well, when you look at just the Canadian depth across the board, the way we ended last year was starting 2 Canadian offensive linemen, 1 receiver, tailback, 2 on the D line, and a free safety, assuming status quo moving into this year. Depth on both sides of the lines is always important. Interior defensive lineman, a defensive end that can add some depth. Offensive line is every single year adding and developing, and with the escalating salaries of your Canadian offensive linemen, it's nice to be in a position each year to put the reality of our business is if you've drafted and developed a younger guy, can he replace an older guy with a higher salary is always in the developmental thought process. Receivers is an interesting one. We only started 1 receiver last year, and generally the receiver that'll be an ongoing question. I'm guessing. Ed wrote an interesting article about the impact of Canadian receivers in today's game, and generally the Canadian receivers play the wide field receiver, and there's just not enough footballs to go out there. The days of the Canadian slot backs having big impacts on game are minimal, and I think teams will be always looking for that Canadian slot back that can maybe be a 1,000-yard receiver, but it's been a few years since you've had an impact Canadian slot back come into this game, but you're always looking for one of those as well.